What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Hello, brave souls. Today's story is called The Whitmore House Investigation. I hope you enjoy. Found on a damaged hard drive recovered from 1247 Elm Street, Millbrook. Date stamp indicates recording began October 13th, 11:47 p.m. Audio transcription follows. My name is David Reeves, and I've been investigating paranormal phenomena for 12 years. I've seen things that would make most people question their sanity. Shadow figures, poltergeist activity, full body apparitions. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I encountered at the Whitmore house. I should have known something was wrong when Mrs. Whitmore called me at 3 a.m., her voice barely above a whisper. She claimed her recently deceased husband was still in the house, and that he was different now. Standard haunting case, or so I thought. She offered me 3 times my usual rate, if I could come immediately. Red flag number 1. The drive to 1247 Elm Street took 45 minutes through increasingly empty roads. I chalked it up to the late hour, but looking back, I realized the streets were too quiet. No late night joggers, no cars, no signs of life whatsoever. The radio had been acting strange too. Nothing but static and occasional emergency broadcasts that cut out before I could make sense of them. The Whitmore house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a modest 2-story colonial that looked like every other house in the subdivision. Something felt wrong the moment I stepped out of my car. The air was thick, almost oppressive, and there was a smell I couldn't quite identify, sweet and rotten at the same time. Mrs. Whitmore answered the door before I could knock. She was a thin woman in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. But her eyes were bloodshot and darting constantly, like she was tracking something I couldn't see. "Oh, thank God you're here," she whispered, pulling me inside. "He's getting worse." The interior of the house was pristine, almost obsessively clean. Family photos lined the hallway, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore at various stages of their 40-year marriage. In every photo, Harold Whitmore appeared to be a gentleman with kind eyes and a warm smile. The kind of grandfather who'd slip you candy when your parents weren't looking. "When did your husband pass away, Mrs. Whitmore?" I asked, setting up my equipment in the living room. 3 days ago," she said, wringing her hands. "Heart attack, but he came back that night. Started walking around upstairs. I can hear him pacing, moving furniture. Sometimes he calls my name." I've heard similar stories before. Grief can manifest in powerful ways, creating auditory and visual hallucinations. Sometimes, the recently deceased do seem to linger, as if they're having trouble accepting their new state. I set up my EMF detector, digital thermometer, and audio recorder, explaining each device to Mrs. Whitmore to help put her at ease. "Has anyone else witnessed this activity?" I asked. Her face darkened. "I called my daughter Sarah 2 days ago. She came over yesterday morning to check on me." Mrs. Whitmore's voice dropped to a whisper. "She went upstairs to investigate the noise. I heard her scream. Then, silence. When I went to look for her, I found the bedroom door locked from the inside. She won't answer me." "Your daughter is still upstairs?" I asked, alarmed. "Mrs. Whitmore, if someone's trapped." "She's not trapped," Mrs. Whitmore interrupted, her eyes wide. "She's with him now. They're both up there, walking around, moving things. They won't talk to me anymore. They just make noises." This was no longer a standard paranormal investigation. I should have called the police immediately. But something about Mrs. Whitmore's demeanor stopped me. She seemed elusive, not delusional, and there was genuine fear in her eyes. Not the confused terror of someone experiencing a psychotic break, but the rational fear of someone who knew exactly what they were dealing with. "I need to go upstairs," I said, gathering my equipment. No! Mrs. Whitmore grabbed my arm with surprising strength. You can't. They'll make you stay too. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Mrs. Whitmore, if your daughter is in danger, I have to help her. That's what you called me to do, right? She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Be careful, she whispered. And whatever you do, don't let them touch you. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed toward the second floor. My EMF detector was going crazy, the needle jumping erratically between readings. The temperature had dropped to at least 10 degrees since I entered the house, and my breath was beginning to fog. But it was the smell that made my stomach churn. That sweet, cloying odor of decay was getting stronger with each step. At the top of the stairs, I found myself in a narrow hallway with 4 doors. 3 were open, revealing a bathroom, a spare bedroom, and what appeared to be a home office. The 4th door, the master bedroom, was closed. I could hear something moving behind it, a rhythmic shuffling sound accompanied by what sounded like wet, labored breathing. I approached the door slowly, my digital recorder in one hand and a flashlight in the other. The EMF detector was screaming now, maxed out completely. I pressed my ear to the door and immediately recoiled. The sounds were clearer now, definitely footsteps. Strong somehow. They were dragging and uneven, like someone was having trouble lifting their feet. Sarah, I said softly. Sarah, are you okay? The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then I heard a voice. A woman's voice, but distorted like it was coming from underwater. Oh, me. I tried the door handle. Locked, just as Mrs. Whitmore had said. But as I examined the lock more closely, I realized something was wrong. The door wasn't locked from the inside. It had been damaged. Deep gouges ran along the door frame, as if something with claws had been trying to break out. And that's when I heard it. A low, guttural moan from behind the door, followed by what sounded like something heavy hitting the floor. Then silence. I made a decision that, in hindsight, probably saved my life. Instead of trying to force the door open, I pulled out my phone to call 911. No signal. I tried again, moving to different spots in the hallway. Nothing. Downstairs, I could hear Mrs. Whitmore moving around, muttering to herself, but her voice sounded different now, strained, like she was having trouble speaking. I started back down the hallway when I heard the bedroom door rattle violently behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam dancing across the walls. The door was shaking in its frame, and I could hear multiple voices now. A man's voice, deep and distorted, and the woman's voice from before, both calling out words I couldn't quite understand. The door stopped rattling. In the sudden silence, I heard Mrs. Whitmore's voice from downstairs. David? Could you come down here, please? I need to show you something. But something was wrong with her voice. It was too cheerful, too sing-song-like a bad impression of politeness. And she was calling me by my first name, which I hadn't given her. I crept to the top of the stairs and peered down at the living room. Mrs. Whitmore was standing with her back to me, perfectly still. Too still. She wasn't breathing. David? She called again, still not moving. I really need you to come down here. My blood went cold. I hadn't told her my name was David. I had introduced myself as Mr. Reeves, and she had called me that throughout our conversation. I backed away from the stairs, my mind racing. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of the bedroom door opening behind me. I turned, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and what I saw will still haunt me for the rest of my life. Harold Whitmore stood in the doorway, but this wasn't the gentle grandfather from the photographs. His skin was gray and mottled, hanging loose in places like an ill-fitting suit. His eyes were clouded white, and his mouth hung open, revealing teeth stained dark with what I hoped was just decay. He was wearing the same clothes he'd probably been buried in, a navy suit that was now torn and stained. Behind him, I could see Sarah. She looked similar to her father. Gray skin, clouded eyes, that same slack-jawed expression. But she was younger, maybe in her 30s, and the transformation seemed more recent. Her business suit was relatively clean, suggesting she'd only recently joined whatever this was. They both turned toward me with that jerky, unnatural movement. Harold's head tilted to one side with an audible crack, and he smiled, a horrible, too wide grin that split his cheek. "Investigator," he said, his voice like gravel. "Come, investigate." Sarah giggled, a sound like breaking glass. "Stay with us." I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my equipment. Behind me, I could hear Mrs. Whitmore's footsteps on the stairs. That same wrong, dragging gait I'd heard from the bedroom. "David," she called sweetly, "don't be rude to my family." I was trapped. The hallway was a dead end, with the two things in front of me and Mrs. Whitmore coming up the stairs behind me. My mind raced through everything I knew about paranormal encounters, but nothing in my experience had prepared me for this. That's when I remembered the spare bedroom. I lunged for the open door, slamming it behind me and turning the lock. It was a flimsy interior door, but it might buy me some time. The room had a window facing the backyard. I ran to it, fumbling with the latch as I heard the family gathering outside the door. They weren't pounding on it or trying to break it down. Instead, they were just waiting. I could hear them whispering to each other in voices too low to understand. The window finally opened, and I looked down. It was a 12-foot drop to the ground, but there was a decorative awning that might break my fall. I gathered my equipment. The digital recorder was still running, and I had a feeling this evidence would be important. As I prepared to climb down the window, I heard Mrs. Whitmore's voice clearer now. "You can't leave, David. You've seen too much. You belong with us now." The door handle began to turn. I didn't wait to see if the lock would hold. I threw my equipment bag out the window and followed it, landing hard on the awning before rolling to the ground. Pain shot through my ankle, but adrenaline kept me going. I limped to my car as fast as I could, constantly looking back at the house. In the upstairs window, I could see silhouettes watching me. Not just 3 now, but what looked like 5 or 6 figures. The infection, if that's what it was spreading. My car started on the first try, and I peeled out the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see the front door of the house standing open, and figures beginning to emerge. They moved with that same wrong, dragging gait, but they were moving faster now, almost running. I drove through the night, my hands shaking on the wheel. Every radio station was playing emergency broadcasts now, though most cut out before delivering complete information. The few coherent messages I caught painted a picture of chaos. Reports of violent individuals in multiple cities, hospitals overrun, and authorities recommending people stay indoors. It wasn't until I reached the interstate that I saw the first roadblock. Military vehicles, armed soldiers, and a checkpoint that looked like it had been set up in a hurry. I pulled over and was approached by a soldier who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Sir, you need to exit the vehicle," he said, his rifle at the ready, but not quite pointed at me. "Officer, I'm a paranormal investigator. I just came from a house where—" "Sir, we know about the house," he interrupted. "We know about the families. How long were you in contact with the affected individuals?" "Affected individuals?" I asked, climbing out of my car. "The infected," he said grimly. "How long?" I told him everything. The investigation, the family, my escape. He listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he spoke into his radio in military jargon I didn't understand. "Mr. Reeves," he said finally, "you're going to need to come with me for observation. Standard quarantine protocol." "Quarantine? For how long?" "Until we figure out how this thing spreads," he said. "Could be days, could be weeks. But sir, you're one of the lucky ones. Most people who go into those houses don't come back out." As they led me to a medical trailer, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "How many houses are there?" The soldier's face was grim. "As of this morning, 743 in this state alone, and the number's growing." The transcript ends here. According to military records, David Reeves was held in quarantine for 14 days before being released. The Whitmore House was destroyed by controlled demolition on October 20th, along with 47 other affected residences in the area. Mr. Reeves' current whereabouts are unknown. This transcript was recovered from his abandoned vehicle, found on Route 15 approximately 30 miles from the quarantine zone. Note: this document is classified under Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha. Distribution is restricted to authorized personnel only. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. Like I said, I've been trying to do some different stuff lately, and I really like these kind of odd zombie type stories. This one's it's got a paranormal feel to it. Might as well have a paranormal investigator be the one to check it out. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good night, and remember to always face your fears.